Greetings, everybody. It's Reggie Middleton doing a live impromptu, very tasty interview at Bryant Park with the famed, the astute, the one and only, the outspoken, but the accurate Max Keiser.
Oh yeah. Hey Reggie, great to be with you.
Okay. So I was talking, we were talking Brexit earlier, and I don't want to rehash the same old that's been throughout the media. But one thing that I was discussing was the fact that I think many supposedly astute and very smart investors were caught with their pants down because they took directional bets based upon Brexit, assuming a Remain vote, which was interesting because when I looked at the polls, they looked rather even or too close to take a directional vote. One possible reason is that everybody was getting reinforcing feedback from the media, which basically wanted to project a Remain vote. But that would be a conspiracy theory, unless...
Well, there's another piece of the puzzle here. I know of one hedge fund, Crispin O'Day, who made over 200 million pounds on the Brexit pound collapse. It looks like, anecdotally, that money was put into the bookies to get the Remain vote a lot higher than would the actual research on the ground suggest. Simultaneously, many times that amount in the futures market betting against the pound. Really? So I think we're seeing this is the problem with neoliberalism and financialization and the end of history as we know it, and the beginning of money as being the only way people have now to communicate. And you have outright manipulation in these markets, which distorted the Remain and the Leave camps, and then the media, not being sophisticated enough to understand how these markets work, just went with this idea that the votes were close or that the Remain was leading. See, and we know that the media is completely not sophisticated because right after this event, there was supposedly another referendum poll that was on the government's website, and it turned out that was being hacked by 4chan. And they were distorting that. So all these price signals, what I mean is that we have the end of history and the beginning of financialization in terms of price signals and communication. All the media reports on prices, and if you can create price propaganda, you can manipulate the BBC into saying anything you want it to say, because they just look at the prices. They don't know where these prices come from. They're generated in a vacuum, and they're easy to manipulate. And so we have this boondoggle of Brexit.
Okay, interesting. It's something I haven't heard. A theory. Or at least a hypothesis I haven't heard before. I think we could get a couple of these going. I see a premature popping of the London commercial real estate bubble, primarily because you have a significant outflow of cash. I would suppose that outflow is illogical. I think that real estate was pricey, very pricey, for quite some time now. But if you're going to pull monies out, you don't pull it out based upon supposition of what's going to happen 5 years from now in a very volatile market. But alas, that's what's being suggested. That's what's been happening. Gates have been put up, and withdrawals have been forbidden for quite some time.
You have a failure of price signals.
Mm-hmm.
You have Chinese investors coming into London who were basically stealing money from the government, and they're willing to pay any price for property in London. The idea is that they'll take 40 or 50 cents on the dollar if there's a crash, which is better than getting 0 cents on the dollar.
Right.
And this lifted the entire market artificially high.
Right.
Now, but of course the media just reports on this bubble, and they report on the ladder, the property ladder, as if to say there's only one way in this market. It only goes up. You've got to get on the property ladder. We have to help these people get on the property ladder. Being on the property ladder is your golden ticket to wealth and riches. But that's absurd because markets are chutes and ladders. They go up and down. Now, when you take away the Chinese marginal buyer from the London property market, you're going to get a 30-40% correction. And it has started. That means the balance sheets of these banks are encumbered dramatically, and you have contagion, and then you have another round of sell-off. So I think the London property bubble, I would disagree with you, and I think that the London property bubble has popped, and we're now, like in 1990, we will see at least a 30% markdown.
That what he described was 2006 redux, where you had in order to justify the CDOs and the mortgage-backed securities and the derivatives on the actual loans and real estate, you had to come up with a fairy tale, which was called PHA, perpetual house appreciation. Basically, the models assumed housing prices were appreciate perpetually, every year, forever. We all know how that turned out. Amazing, what is it, 2006, 2016, the 10-year anniversary of stupidity. And we're going through the same thing once again.
Yeah, well, I mean, go back to 1987 and the crash of 87, and the beginning of government-implemented moral hazard. You know, you had the what's called the plunge protection team.
Right.
So they came in and they bought S&P futures, and markets were artificially pumped up from 87 lows. It went to the 94, and you had a bond bubble burst. Then you had a dot-com bubble burst. Then you had the subprime bubble burst. Then you're having a sovereign market bubble burst. So every 7 or 8 years, and now we're perfectly on schedule, Reggie, this is happening like clockwork. You have sudden realization that these are artificial markets. The only thing that's changed is that the ability for the banks to take on ever greater amounts of debt against a weaker collateral base, and the AAA sovereign credit continues getting marked down all the time. You know, the UK lost its AAA rating. That means that the debt to equity ratio in the entire economy just went up.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's now playing out all over the world. So the only question is this the bubble that will cause the real collapse, depression-like collapse, or will they find a way to pump this up for another 7-year cycle? I don't see how they're going to pump it up for another cycle. I think this is now going to be the end of this cycle. This is the bubble pop of the century, I think.